So the first pose I'll work with here is the seated pose, and we'll start with the mannequin. So I have the labels over here on my layers, and I'll leave them right here at the edge of the window so you can see where we are with each pose. And we're in the mannequin phase right now. The mannequin phase, I draw the head and then I draw the shoulders, and I try to get them to relate to each other before I connect them with the neck. But this is the phase where you learn about the gesture. There's no muscles involved in this stage. This is the skeleton. You're building on the skeleton form. And if you haven't taken the figure construction class, then you might be asking me at this point, what the hell are you talking about skeleton when that looks like something completely different from a skeleton? And you would be right. This is called the core of the pose, or the pillow shape. And what we're looking for here is the rib cage and the pelvis, the shoulders and the hips, all together in one enclosure. Since they all kind of work off of the core, and since they're all a part of the core of the pose, it's easiest to find that first. And then we go back in and we'll block out what we need. If we need to draw the rib cage in, we know that it'll be somewhere right around in here. If we need to draw the pelvis in, we know that it'll be somewhere right around in here. And we have a rough location for these shapes, right? Also knowing that the leg comes from about 2/3 of the elevation of the pelvis, half of the pillow shape, which those lines would hurry up and draw there. It kind of gives us a landmark of where to stop. Then we look for the gesture of the arms and the legs, and we look for these using lines of flexion. I'll actually go ahead and add the neck in at this point, the neck cylinder at least, and we kind of know that it attaches right up around in there. This knee is somewhere very close to the core of the pose, while this knee is out here somewhere. We draw the knee end of the cylinder. This is the other half of the cylinder over here and over here. We got to split them just a little bit to make room for the center of the figure, where the genitals go. And then after that, we continue building out these cylinder forms. Then we build downward. Now, yes, the leg looks like it's doing this, but it's actually not doing that in the skeleton, the core of the skeleton. This is the kneecap, and these are the tendons of the leg, and those two things together make it look like this. But it's not actually doing that. So I want to make that very clear, especially for those of you who haven't taken the anatomy classes before. The leg does not bend in that direction. So we're preventing that from occurring. And I'm drawing these lines in what I said before, the line of flexion. The flexion line is the direction that the bones bend in. And I'm looking for the placement of the feet at this point, the door wedges, right? So door wedge up, door wedge out, heel out behind, and then we have lastly here the other cylinder forms that we need to find, the two halves of the arms, and then the hand shapes where they would go. All right, so now the next thing I want to do, I want to place ellipses on each of these cylinders so I know roughly what the perspective is. As I'm drawing my picture, I need to know those things, these things, so that I can decorate accordingly. And that includes the core of the pose. Which direction is the core of the pose facing? All right, so that's the armature, and we know that the guy is sitting on a chair, so let's go ahead and put that in there too. Let's give him a surface to sit upon. That way when we draw this back in space, it actually has something to land on top of. And that is basically how we would draw a gesture of somebody doing something anyway, something specific in a specific position, interacting with a specific object, in this case a chair. All right, so that's the armature. The next thing we want to do is look for the musculature that sits on the armature. And remember that the musculature is an extension of the armature, and then it comes back to the armature. Those are the tendons and the bones of the armature, or of the body. Bicep is over in here. Coracobrachialis, bicep, and deltoid are influencing on this arm. Ridge muscles are definitely influencing on this arm. Ridge muscles are kind of influencing through here. Pectoralis or latissimus muscle and pectoralis is definitely influencing. Collarbone, let's look for those. In the legs, we have the calf muscle for sure on the back of this leg. We have the calf muscle on the back of this leg for sure. The kneecap forward on this leg. The kneecap forward on this leg, we'll find that because that's certainly influencing it. Thigh muscle that's draping, and the quadriceps that are extending upward slightly off of the leg. And then everything else is the core of the pose, the tendons, the bones, and the next thing we want to do is build on the action of the pose. Now, I often do this for these demonstrations, but I do say that you should probably do it for your drawings as well. And that is to put a white layer between each layer that you're building upon. That way you can really separate out the different distinctions, because once you start building a lot of these roadmaps, things are going to get a little bit messy pretty quickly. All right, so we've got a collar that's high up here, and then we have the V-neck collar low down here. And this collar has an opening geometrically this way, in addition to hitting up the curvature that goes around the neck. And then in the fronts, we've got the two collar extensions sweeping away. And that kind of concludes the shapes in there. Here's the inside, because the inside is based upon the lower ellipse and the upper ellipse. The button line is in here, and we can see its influence as it moves down into the sweater. The sweater is a circle for the neck, and then a V shape that extends off of that. And the V shape should sort of feel like it's dipping downward this way. So the point of the V will not be uniform to this line that we draw of the neck. It won't be like that. That doesn't look like it's bending downward. We actually need it to kind of do something more like this. Like this. Where is it? Come on, there you go. More like that. Bending it downward. Okay, so then we need the cuff lines. And the nice thing about having those ellipses drawn in before, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to draw these cuff lines in as we build everything else out. So we have the cuff lines around in there. We have the cuff line over in here, both of them. We have the end of the pant leg here, and we have the end of the pant leg over here. The belt line, the division between the shirt and the pants, right along in here. So now we have all of the major features or the major divisions in the clothing. Now it's just a matter of coming back in and finding this silhouette. And I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to find this architecturally like this in here, but this is actually an extended line. There's a second line back in here, and this is where the pipe folds are going to come out and meet the end of that mass right in there. So basically I just did this. I'm working over on the photograph now. I did this, and I drew out to the end of where that pipe fold is going to go. That way I have a little bit of a map of the volume that I'm going to be working with, the total volume that I'm dealing with. This comes down and extends outward a little bit wider. This extends outward over here. Maybe it doesn't want to extend. There it goes. These go up and around and back to the corner of the shoulder nearest us. And then this extends outward along the side of the deltoid. There's a few folds that come out from there. And then this comes down this way. Pardon my extreme heavy line work right now. I don't actually have control over what line I'm using until after it shows up on screen. I don't know what's going on right now. Maybe I have too many files open or something. I don't know. Too many layers on this file. But anyway, the cloth comes down this way and then it extends outward this way. On the back of the leg along here, this comes down and stays flush with the leg. There's a small pipe fold out over in here, and I just basically made an extension line just in case I decide to use it, but I'm not sure if I will yet or not. Sometimes folds can be a bit distracting to the action, and some folds won't be used while others will be played up even more. So be prepared for lying a little bit. And I made his leg a little bit longer than it probably should be, and I'm going to be okay with that for the demonstration. And there are the masses now for the material. So the next thing we look for, there's the half lock in here. I'm going to look for the major tension points first. The half lock over here. The half lock right along in here. The half lock here. The major primary fold in here, the primary fold up in here, the stitch line along the side of the pants, and then the pipe fold in here, the space where it's going to go, the line for the pipe fold in here, and then the elliptical lines off of each of those half locks going up towards the collar. Looks like that's a button-up sweater. So, and actually, yeah, it is a button-up sweater. And those are going to go something like that eventually. The line will be like this for now, though, just so we have something to work with. And then we'll get more specific later. That actually dips down a little bit lower towards the hip here. And that goes up towards the armpit. And then the radiation from the kneecap. So we've got a fold coming off of this corner, coming off of this corner, coming off of the front bottom, coming off of this corner, coming off of this corner, heading over this way. And then we have a few radiating folds going back in this direction on the leg. And then they sort of straighten up this way, radiating. And then we get into the hip over here. And they turn this way. They go up and over the thigh like this. Oops, the stitch line is actually way up here. Not used to them being so high up. Okay, so then all these folds are radiating off in this direction. And then there's folds underneath here that are again coming off of the kneecap. So finding the whole shape of the kneecap is very helpful here. Knowing where each of the different angles of the kneecap are causing those radiation lines. A couple more folds along in there. And then into the armpit we go here. And these folds terminate along the edge of the pectoralis. So these come out this way and end along the lateral edge of the pectoralis. The other folds along here are coming off of the base of the pectoralis. This is coming from the slack part of the shoulder over here. As soon as it decides it wants to draw in, there we go. And so is this one here. And then there's other radiating lines in that space that are sort of doing this, then doing this, and then doing this. And then we have a few in the wrist. And then we have a couple down here in the cuff and a couple down here in this cuff as well, or at the end of the pant leg. And then over the elbow and through the woods, we've got these lines going from the elbow forward, and then from the elbow, and then switching up into the armpit. And all of these are going up towards the stitch line. We have a couple more. I have to draw these lengths in just a little bit longer here and over here, and then down through here, because they actually do have direction to them. And I would love it if they showed up. That would be awesome. Alright, so there's that one. Even my dogs are being a critic here. Alright, and then coming down through here, we have some folds that we have to find in the waist. And it appears as though nothing really wants to be drawn right now. There we go. Something's showing up. Something else on my computer seems to be wanting to take over all of my memory. Maybe it's just my memory. There's a line there. There's a couple lines over here, and they radiate up from the buttons. And then there's a second radiation line coming from those radiating lines. And those go all the way around the body. So the problem with not being able to see what I'm drawing here is I don't know how far exactly the lines I drew are. Until I can finally see them, I can't judge what I have done. Alright, so there's the action lines, and I'm certainly going to do a restart on the computer before I get going on the next stage because this is just pathetically slow here. All right, now that we have all the lines in, knowing where the folds are going to go, the next thing to do is develop those out into 3 dimensions, into the pipe folds. And these lines are a bit too rugged here. These are really heavy. So the next line weight I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in even closer so I can kind of see where I'm going